What is Doom Eternal? A first-person shooter, which is a possible sequel to the 2016 Doom, but it feels more like a sequel to the original Ultimate Doom from 1995. But before I start, a small disclaimer. I played on PC. It took roughly 14 hours to complete only the main story with a good number of collectibles and upgrades, and it was on Hurt Me Plenty, which is normal difficulty. I have not attempted the multiplayer yet, but that may come as a new video sooner or later. The video background you're seeing is the first of the master levels. There will be some spoilers for the gameplay, story and other things in this video. Please be warned. Starting with the music. Music-wise, this is just as amazing, and Mick Gordon created perfection for this game. He sent out an open call for heavy metal artists to come and help create a death metal choir. While I was butchering the creatures from hell, it was keeping pace and keeping the atmosphere as energetic. I am a huge fan of heavy metal, and there is a large chance I will purchase the soundtrack just like I did for Doom 16. The way it would start up the flow of combat passively in my first experience of each track, I was drawn in quickly and I felt like I was the Slayer himself. I cannot fault the music at all. Moving on, honestly I was blown away by the contrast on design when comparing it to 2016 and how colourful each level was. It was incredible theming for each area that I encountered, and which felt like I was in fact on different planets and dimensions. It was very strongly reminded me of the levels of Doom 2 back in 1997. Whenever I was not in combat, I was often looking around at the environment and marvelling at the power of the ID Tech 7 engine, which even on my PC was running quite smoothly on a mix of settings which were set by the game itself based on my computer specs. Even the recording I made for the review background was incredibly smooth. But occasionally, when there was large amounts of demons and effects all happening at once, the frame rate did slow a minor amount. I would have loved to see what the game looks like when the settings are maxed out. The level design is very linear, pushing players from A to B in a roundabout sort of way, but there are small little hidden things hidden in the levels that can be found with a good amount of exploration, as well as a keen eye, or if you can find the auto map found in every level to get a rough idea of what they are. Even with the more linear levels, the game still feels close to how I visualized when playing the original games. However, most of the combat areas are much more open and varied, allowing the players to duck, dive and delve around the level, smashing heads and racking the body count higher and higher as a one-man army. There was a fun variety of new demons to murderize on top of the original cast, which we shot at all the way back in the 90s. Some of the demons that didn't make it into the last game, the Archvile, Paid Elemental and Arachnotron, have now made their appearance and sporting fantastic visuals to match. The Baron of Hell has now had a visual wash of his own, sporting more cybernetics. One of the newly named demons bears a visual very similar to the original cyber demon called the Tyrant. It is a huge boy who is tanky as hell, pun intended. And now for the gameplay. This is the big one. How could they possibly take what they did in the 2016 game and make it bigger, better and more bloody glorious? They increased the Doom guy's mobility and utility. He now has a dash and has kept the double jump from making combat more vertical and varied. It is encouraged through the application of demons that the players do not stop moving when in combat, as it is a death sentence when the horde bears down at you. The wide variation of combat environments requires the Slayer to think fast on how he can use it to his advantage, mostly through being able to outmaneuver the demons, especially the armoured ones. Some of the smaller environments and corridor-like areas can become quite messy when the demons can very quickly move around you or even spawn behind you. So it is advantageous that you should manage your dash charges even in the most hectic of fights. It is also a point that the dash only recharges while the Slayer is on the solid ground, so you cannot keep dashing through the air unless you find a specific pickup which can only be found at certain locations. These locations tend to be found during the jumping puzzle segments, which I'll mention in a minute. On a couple of occasions I've thrown myself off edges by accident, which quickly snapped me out of the red curtain of bloodlust as I've had to save myself from falling. Thankfully, while falling only causes some minor damage to the Slayer as he is reset back onto the last surface he stood on, be aware that if you fall off with less than 10 health, you will die, and I've found it to be extremely frustrating. In the lulls of combat there is something new, platforming and minor puzzles. I'm using the word puzzle in the loosest possible way, as they are not in the form of puzzle where you do a mini-game to complete a challenge of the mind. It's more finding the next button, or punching a particularly glowy object at the right time, and maybe shooting a hidden green target. But even then, they are small reprieves from the fighting and are refreshing as it gives you time to think and enjoy the environment. My only issue is that sometimes the climbing mechanic is a touch clunky, and I found myself stuck in one position until I remembered that I needed to look directly up at the wall. The Slayer's new utilities are really fun to play with. Rather than giving the standard set of grenades that he needs to find, he's equipped with a new launcher on his shoulder that offers two choices of requiring no ammunition, but during the beginning of the game it feels like he has a long cooldown timer on it. Later on, with upgrades and strategic use, it can be quickly a fantastic asset against the Legion of Hell. The first one is a standard grenade, useful for clearing out small minions of hell or just launching in hope of a shower of blood anywhere. The second one is a freezing grenade. It is extremely useful for finding a window of opportunity to release a large amount of damage on creatures and or quickly making a getaway during combat. It is super effective when shared with regular grenades, as you can unleash a hell of a lot of damage quickly in a tight situation. The second of the utilities is a flamethrower or the belcher, allowing you to gain some armor back through murdering anything you've set on fire, but it is only really effective if you use it on a large group of squishy demons and smoosh them all at once for a massive armor drop. Otherwise you end up gaining a small amount immediately to be burned out of existence by the horde that is impolitely waiting for you. One of the returning features brought into the Doom games in 2016 are the glory kills. Whenever you harm a demon enough, it may begin to flash blue or gold depending on how close you are. Gold indicates you are in range to initiate a fantastic visceral and killing blow to whatever demon falls victim to you. I think they've done a fantastic job on finding out how many ways to murder a demon somehow. And if I were to pick a favourite, like the absolute normal human being that I am, it would be found on one of the new demons called the Whiplash, a snake-like demon that reminds me of the mythical creature called the Naga. The Slayer starts off this kill by grabbing the demon's arm and snapping it, so a large spike of bone is poking out. He then spears the thing's brain with its own arm bone. The weapons in the game now have 3 categories, depending on which ammo they use. They have been rounded down to shotgun shells, bullets, and energy rounds, which makes managing them a bit easier and harder at the same time. Easier because there is less unique ammunition to find, but there are 2 weapons that use it at the same time, so the player must use the limited ammunition wisely. Like I mentioned during the beginning, it is noted that the player has a very small ammunition store throughout the game. Even when upgraded, there still needs to be an eye on it just in case you run out, which happens to me very, very often. On the plus, they give you the chainsaw to get you more ammunition. It regenerates 1 blip of fuel back by itself, probably powered by the sheer hate for demons, and then you can find more fuel blips in the map. Most of the small demons, the imps, the zombies, and the randos that wander around the map will only require the 1 point, but the rest of the demon horde, barring some of the stupidly massive ones, require that the player have 3 blips of fuel available, which is unlikely to happen as during my game I was constantly running out of the small amount of ammunition I had. All the weapons were very well made in design and how they felt to shoot. This includes the infamous BFG returning, and we have a good variety of weapons that you will eventually become very familiar with. One thing they took from the previous game and didn't include it was the pistol, which I thought wasn't the greatest idea because it forced you to use the chainsaw a hell of a lot more. However, most of the guns have 1 or 2 fiery modes that add spice to the gameplay, and another thing that they brought back from the 2016 Doom. I found that in the end I was using the combat shotgun with the grenade launcher attachment the most, as it was the best in most situations I was in, and I had really the most fun playing it. Even then, in most situations I was jumping between weapons constantly as my strategy changed with every demon summoned. And yes, there was strategy to my bloodlust. Mostly it was just to keep shooting till everything stopped moving. The 2 new weapons included the Ballista, a huge demonic crossbow which is very effective against flying demons, and the late game edition known as the Crucible Blade. The blade is similar in use on how the chainsaw was in the previous game, very useful for taking out larger demons with little issue, but it doesn't drop ammunition. The downside of this fantastic weapon is the limited ammo. Yes, ammo you had available. Since it is a super powerful weapon that is capable of taking out creatures as tall as skyscrapers, I can understand how they might want to limit the usage of it. but with the limited ammunition found only on the latest parts of the game, it was hard to fully enjoy it. Don't get me wrong, I really loved the Crucible Blade, but I would have preferred it on a long cooldown rather than having to rely on pickups. Some more new additions to the gameplay now include destructible parts on demons, the Arachnotron's gun, the Revenant's launchers, and the Mancubus guns. These little things provided the player with a nice bit of strategy and some variation on gameplay, especially as you can use it to massively weaken the creature's firepower first if you need to focus on a more meaty demon, especially the ones with bigger guts. Additionally, there are energy shields which feature a lot during the game. These can be overloaded and made into weapons themselves just by shooting them with a plasma gun. Although one of the demons who projects the shields from a distance has often got me killed when a new Barra inexplicably appeared behind me and blocked my path away from the Pinky that decided that I was the wall it needed to charge. A small number of what can officially be called boss fights. For the most part, they felt like they had a good combat loop and some unique instructions on how to combat them. One of the early bosses reminded me of the 2016 Cyber Demon boss fight, which was really nice. This brings me on to one thing that occurred to me that I didn't think about until I stopped playing the game. Most unique encounters with demons or bosses have instructions on how to beat them, forced onto you with info cards stopping the flow of gameplay. These explain specific mechanics and weaknesses which could be discovered naturally as the player fights the demon horde. This could be followed on with info cards being updated in the index if the player chooses to look. Vegas, the handy AI that helps the Slayer, could have let the players know audibly that they have discovered the weakness, or the codex could have been updated on with new information. My biggest problem with this is that the mechanics of some of the bosses and mini-bosses literally require an explanation before it's even possible to know how to apply the Doomblade to their face. Especially when fighting the Marauder, as you wouldn't know that the only time you can actually damage him is when his eyes flash green. And this demon is something I have an issue with. Now let's talk about one of the new mini-bosses of the game, the Marauder. He is a good-looking boss with a cool voice and weapons, but he is the worst thing about this game. Your whole flow when fighting comes to a jagged standstill thanks to him. His weapons include an axe which can turn into a shield, a shotgun similar to the Doom Guy's Super Shotty, and his Hellhound of infinite inconvenience and annoyance. To start, he has a large health pool and high damage. These I could forgive even with the shield. Whenever the Slayer is too close, he will shoot the Shotty to push the Slayer back, and when you're too far away, he will throw the energy axes at the Slayer too. You have to be in that magic sweet spot, which changes all the bloody time because he is super mobile as well. His mobility includes dashes which rival the Slayer's but seem to have no limit, as he is constantly almost teleporting behind me. My biggest issue is that you cannot destroy the shield to gain a chance to do the damage, as his shield is invulnerable to all damage. The only time you can actively attack him is when his eyes flash green and he makes an attempt to hit you with his axe, if you can. The shield comes up within seconds and you can barely make a dent in his health. I cannot imagine what he's going to be like in the harder difficulties. Remember I mentioned the Hellhound? He can summon that almost constantly, even if you have killed it 10 times before. Also, like the Marauder, it is fast, does a lot of damage, and can trap you against a wall if you are unlucky. Its health pool is basically nothing if you play your cards right, but it is just as agile as the thing that summons it, so it can be difficult to hit. Every fight I have been in with the Marauder often needs retrying about 10 times because I have misstepped once and he just piles in on me. The whole fight just grinds to a halt because I have to do massive roundabouts in the combat areas, desperately getting health, ammunition and armor back, with the bloody Hound nipping at the Slayer's arse. I forgot to mention that you cannot use the Crucible Blade or the Chainsaw on him, and firing the BFG is a waste of ammo thanks to his shield. Even in the bio, it says he is resistant to super weapons. Why? In short, while he is a cool fight the first time you meet him, afterwards he is literally thrown in levels randomly, grinding the whole floor to a halt, and the flow of combat is ruined until he's dead. There were a couple of small issues I found while playing. A couple of times when I was playing in the hub world at the Doom Fortress, I found that a couple of the doors ceased to function, so I had to restart the level. They stayed open, so I assumed that I could just walk through, but instead they ended up just being invisible and impenetrable walls. Also, during the game outside the hub world, I only had to restart a level once due to a bug where one of the shield projector buggers got outside of the wall and I couldn't finish the combat area, trapping me in there. The number of unique collectibles for upgrading your suit, ammo, health and armor is just too much in my opinion. I would have been fine with 2, including one for weapon points and the other for the Slayer's utilities, armor, health. While it did encourage me to explore the world around me, which was nice, I did find that it was a bit tedious after a while, as I normally do not have a habit of 100% in games. Some of the animations should have been a bit faster for non-combat actions. While I was unlocking things in the hub world using the Sentinel batteries, the animations took roughly 10-15 seconds, which was fine the first few times, but when I was doing a long string of unlocks, I found it was getting very monotonous very quickly. It would have been nice to have just skipped the longer animations, like by pressing a button and just to keep going, but there were a few small notable things that I thought were really cool. I do love some of the collectibles in the game, even though I poo-pooed it earlier. It adds a sense of fun lightheartedness that you find little toy versions of demons in the game, and it makes the Doomslayer a massive otaku. What a weeb. Continue on with the collectibles thing. There are extra lives that can be found throughout the levels in the game. These are not necessarily needed, but if you were like me and waste them trying to beat the Marauder, they can be a useful little backup just in case you misstep in your bloody slaying fun. I do like how they directly reference the original games directly as well in the story, and how they also referenced in a comic book that comes back to the OG Doom games. You can earn the OG Doom Guy's armor set to wear in game as well, and it really ties it all together. The story, while probably hidden behind most of the collectible text I didn't read yet, was a nice simple story that revealed itself at a good pace. It made some more sense to the chaos that was unfolding around me as I was ripping and tearing, and I found that was quite useful as I was playing. But in conclusion, the Doom Eternal is a fantastic addition to the Doom games, bringing a mix of old and new into the first years of 2020. As someone who's been playing the game since the beginning, I feel that the game is going partially in the right direction, but I fear that some people in suits will eventually force some more modernised gaming aspects in, if there is to be another game. Luckily, for now, we didn't have to deal with the rubbish that was loot hunting in measly open worlds. I still have issues with the overuse of the Marauder and how much of an attention whore he is. Whenever he appears in a fight, after the first encounter, it becomes the sole focus on it. And if you don't, he will completely destroy you thanks to his high mobility, high damage, and incredible ability to focus the spotlight on himself. So hard, in fact, that ABBA might have to change the lyrics of Super Trooper. Finally, should you buy it? I think you should if you are a fan of Doom and have the money to spare. If you are a new person being brought into the series for the first time, I think you should actually get the 2016 Doom and enjoy that before you get the new one. Hell, pun intended, you should, if you can, find and play some of the games that came out in the 90s. Even though there were a few bad points, and some things I can forgive because they can be easily patched, there were good points of this game outweigh the bad by a wide margin. Thankfully, this game did actually appease the hype for me, but maybe not for others, and that is something that could be considered for future games. Thank you for watching. This is the most detailed script I have ever written, and I hope that you came out with something. If you have disagreements or other thoughts, feel free to comment down below, and I will try to reply. And finally, I'll see you next time. This has been a fun thing because I haven't fully got my voice back. I have had a cold for the past week and a half, and it won't clear, so my voice sounds a bit off. But anyway, I'll see you next time. Bye bye.